Do you need to see a counselor?
Yes, I do.
Today on the Ferguson Home, Barry and I want to talk about the pros and the cons of professional counseling and the help it provides for your marriage.
Welcome back to the Ferguson Home. Just a little reminder, if you have not subscribed to our channel yet, we actually don't even see who subscribes to our channels. That's kind of funny. We have people who stop us to tell us they have. We don't see it, but it just helps YouTube to know to keep showing our videos, right?
That's
I really
right.
don't actually know what it does, but I think we're supposed to say subscribe to our channel. Keeping it real. Go ahead.
Killing me.
Go ahead.
Well, today on the Ferguson Home, we want to talk about the pros and cons of professional counseling. We hear from people all the time, either that they don't want to go to counseling or that they think counseling will help solve all their marriage problems. And so today we want to kind of give a balanced view, some of the pros of counseling, the cons of it. Barry and myself have been to counseling together for our own marriage, and so we've seen benefit in our own relationship. And so we want to talk today about some of the things we've seen and also some of the things to be careful of as you're considering counseling. Let's start with Proverbs 12:15, which says, "A fool's way is right in his own eyes, but whoever listens to counsel is wise." And so this scripture really speaks to the value of getting somebody to speak into your life and provide counsel. It doesn't have to be a licensed professional counselor who gives you that counsel, but it's important that it's somebody who's wise, someone who's godly, someone who really loves you and cares for you and wants the best for you. And so many times that can be a professional counselor. And so why don't we share some of the things that we've seen that are beneficial in professional counseling?
Yeah, I think one of the things is that it helps us to just have somebody outside of our situation to see it in a right way. Because when you're in the midst of it and you're talking, you can really miss really important details.
Yeah.
And that it just helps to have a listening ear to be like, hey, wait a second. And they don't even say it in a condescending way. They just know the questions to ask to make you kind of uncover like, oh yeah, I wasn't seeing that.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing that we have found helpful even in our own marriage is we haven't been in a place of crisis like we were going to get a divorce or something, but just needing a tune-up. I think many times, especially men, are like, well, I don't need counseling. Like, I can figure this thing out and I don't need help or whatever. And so one of the benefits of counseling is that it really helps you fight drift in your relationship because you just kind of get into some unhealthy habits and routines and you start to kind of drift apart from each other. And so we always see one of the benefits of counseling is it just fights that drift and helps to kind of push you back together as a couple.
You using that word, I just listened to a podcast that we will try to put somewhere, a link, but it was so good. She was a licensed professional counselor and she gave that example of drift. And she just said when you're at the beach and you're just kind of floating along, that before you know it, and you walk up to the beach, you realize I'm way down the beach, that I've drifted. And she was connecting that to our relationships and just said the natural tendency of relationships is to drift. And we actually, when we're young and in love, we don't process that. And so it surprises us or catches us off guard. And then we think something's wrong.
Yeah.
But to realize like that actually is easier for us to do. It's our natural bent. And that you have to really work hard, which is where counseling comes in to fight that drift and to stay together.
That's good. One of the other pros of counseling, and this is very practical, is it's cheaper than divorce. And so we hear from people that say, oh, counseling's so expensive, $125, $150 an hour to go meet with a licensed counselor. And yes, it's expensive. And that's actually one of the cons we'll get to in a minute. But when you look at it compared to the cost of what you're going to spend if you go through the divorce process, it's nothing compared to the cost of divorce. Hiring lawyers, having to split households, having to pay for 2 places to live, like all the things that go into the cost of divorce, it's astronomical. And so we would just say, invest the money before you get to that place of divorce to try to work on the relationship.
Yeah, and I would say too, if that's the goal, if the goal is like we're willing to invest this money because we want our marriage to work, be very careful about which counselor you choose. And so not all counselors are the same, right? And so make sure that the one that you're going to has your same belief system and that they are pro-marriage and not pro-individual. Like, well, you need to have your own, truth, and I don't know what they say, but don't go to it. Don't fall down that trap.
No, that's really good. And that's one of the things that we want to say about just the positives of professional counseling is that you can get expertise and you can get assistance from somebody who shares your worldview. And so make sure you do that, because just like you can hear pastors that preach anything, you can read authors who write anything, you can find counselors who will say anything. So you really want to ask around. You want to make sure you're going to someone who has a biblical worldview, who's coming from a Christian perspective, if you want to hear what God has to say into your relationship. Yeah. So one of the other things that we just think is helpful is that counseling is for everybody. And it's important to be wise about who you go to see. It's important to recognize, just the value of what counselors are going to say. But it's also just important to remember that we're all broken. We all need help, and it's not saying anything's wrong with you if you go to see a counselor. Like sometimes you just need a tune-up, you need help, you need somebody, like you said, I'm not seeing this clearly.
And they've gone to school for it. Like we go to a doctor for medical help when we need, because why? They've put in the money and the time and the investment to have that knowledge that we don't have. We haven't taken the time to do that. And I think it's the same with counselors. Like they've taken the time to really understand relationship struggles and what's going on in our mind and how that all impacts other things and decisions. And so why wouldn't we seek them out before we seek out a lawyer to end things? Why wouldn't we seek out people who actually have done their homework and know their stuff?
That's really good. So on the con side, what are some things to watch out for whenever you are searching for professional counseling help, okay? First of all, it can be expensive. And so just recognize that you're going to invest a lot of money to go see a professional counselor. We think it's totally worth it. Whenever you're needing a tune-up, you need some of that expertise and that outside assistance into your relationship. But just know, like, some people just can't afford it. They get into a place where it's like, I just can't afford this because of the other financial responsibilities and things that they have on their plate. So we understand that it's expensive.
And that, can I just break in? Yeah. That's the reason why we talk about on this video series a lot about our marriage ministry at our church called Reengage. And if you get on marriagehelp.org, you can find a Reengage program that's near you. And I would highly encourage you to do that and sign up. Because the thing is that there's so many that counseling is not an option. Like they want to, they're willing to, but really there's nowhere to finagle the money to make that happen. And we saw that. We kept talking to couples around us that would end up getting divorced, saying, hey, when we were going through a struggle, we looked around and it was all so expensive, and it was just counselors. There was no ministry geared towards helping marriages. And Reengage, and I know other churches offer different programs that are equally as good, but look to churches, because their heart is to provide counseling that's cost effective.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not to take the place of counselors, because they have a spot that is needed. That's right. And there's oftentimes we send people after Reengage to a counselor.
Yeah.
So definitely it doesn't replace it, but it's an option. If you're like, we need help, but we can't afford counseling, I just want you to know to really look to the churches around you to see what they offer.
And beyond that, here's a couple other things to just be cautious of. I think there can be in our minds, well, I go to a counselor and that's where I share my real stuff.
Yeah.
Because that's a safe place where there's confidentiality and I can really bare my soul. But I'm going to go to Reengage, or I'm going to go to my small group, or I'm going to go to this community of people within the church, and I'm not going to really be honest, because that's what I do with the counselor. So I want to just caution you when you start to go see a counselor that you don't start to create this mindset where that's where I deal with my real issues and I don't deal with my real issues over here. Because if that's your mindset, then you're never going to experience growth and transformation within the church and the body of Christ. And so don't use counseling as a substitute for honesty inside the church. The third thing I would just tell you to watch out for is that sometimes people will use counseling as kind of a way to pass responsibility for the things they need to work on. And every good professional counselor will tell you the same thing, that their counseling is only as effective as what you and I will do with the advice that they give us. And so it's not, I hear couples all the time, well, we're going to go to counseling and the counselor's going to fix us. That's not how it works. You're going to go to the counselor and the counselor's going to give you some tools, framework, some things, some exercises to work on, and then he or she's going to send you out and say, here's the things to go do to work on your relationship. And if you're not going to work on it and put in the effort, then the counseling's not going to benefit you.
Yeah, it's not a quick fix.
No, it's not a quick fix. And so just don't see counseling, there's value there, and all the reasons we said before that we think counseling is helpful, and we've experienced it in our own lives. But what we've learned through that process is it's not a silver bullet. Like going to see a counselor is going to fix everything that's broken. Like you have to put in the work.
Yeah, and sometimes, so we've said a couple of times that we've been to counseling. There's been different reasons, and so for some of you, it's not like your marriage is falling apart. We've gone to counseling at times because he pastors a church, and we've been hurt.
Yeah.
There have been seasons where the hurt is so overwhelming, and where we've been hurt by believers. So to process that is really hard, and where we've had to go. The wounds have just been so deep that we've needed to go get help to work through that.
Or there's times where we've gotten counseling because we're struggling with one of our kids.
With parenting, where we just feel like we don't have the tools, we're not equipped. And so just having a listening ear and help us, give us ideas, because we're so in the trenches that we're not seeing straight anymore.
Absolutely.
We're just tired and
Yeah, so that's a great word. It's not always because it's broken between the two of you, but it's just saying we need help.
But it's affecting our marriage, like those different parts. So sometimes just recognizing that there's been some circumstances or some grief that happens in your life that can we go to counseling to process how this new whatever's been brought into your life, how do I do life in this season carrying this burden or that grief, or I've gone to counseling with my kids who have needed it, and I go with them because it helps me to know how to talk to them, how to help them apply the tools that they need. Why else? I mean, we've gone to counseling because trying to figure out dynamics with making it healthy in our home, having a parent live with us, so that have kids we're raising, have a parent living with us, and that's like there's just been different things. So I think there's a variety of reasons why you say I need to go see a counselor, and each of those times we've only gone for like 4 to 6 times. It's not like an indefinite amount or even a year commitment, but saying, hey, I need to just dedicate a month or two that I'm going to weekly face this struggle.
Yeah, absolutely. And the final thing to watch out for or just be aware of with counseling, and one of the cons of it is it's just limited in the amount of time that you can benefit from the counseling. So you're going to pay, like we said, $125 or something for an hour session. But that session is going to be over, and the counselor is going to meet with the next person. You've got to go on. And so the point there is to say, just be aware of what counseling is and what it's not. It's not a substitute for the church.
Right.
It's not a substitute for taking responsibility and doing the work you need to in your marriage. And it's not a substitute for friendship. Like it gives you limited amounts of time, but how many times we've been in a counseling session and be like, man, we're out of time, but there's so many more things we want to talk about or ask about. And that's not the counselor's fault. That just means our life is complicated. And we just need to recognize there's certain things you can get from a counselor. There's other things you need in friends. Like you just need people you can sit around the kitchen table with or have coffee with or sit in the backyard with for hours, and you're not on the clock of like, okay, you've got, 5 more minutes and then you got to get out of here.
Yeah, and I think recently some of the most growth we've had has actually come from your life coach or executive coach, but he's been a huge influence in our life of just in a gentle way of seeing things differently and then helping us to process them and calling them out that we haven't seen. So I've been super thankful for his counsel and wisdom, and so shout out to Daniel Mueller. One last thing I want to ask you before we end this, and that is we oftentimes get this conversation where somebody will come and say they're in the process of divorce already, and they'll say, hey, I tried. I've asked him, specifically the wife saying, I've asked him for years to go to counseling to work on our marriage, and he refused. And then at some point she breaks and says, I'm done. He's convinced he's not going to work on the marriage. It's falling apart. So therefore I'm out. Why is that the tendency for men to not want to go to a counselor more than
multiple
women?
reasons? Sometimes it's just that we as men don't want to talk about our feelings. And so it's like I'm going to get in a room with my wife and a person is going to look at me and ask me about how I feel about things. That makes me uncomfortable. I'm sure this is going to embarrass me because I've done things in the marriage marriage. I'm embarrassed about, I don't want another person to know about all my issues and my flaws. There's all these reasons.
Yeah.
I think ultimately, though, I think there's just this pride in men, like, I know how to fix this. I know it's broken, but I can work a little harder, press in a little bit more, and I'm going to fix this. And so I think what you're saying is, we hear from wives, like, I've been asking for us to get help, but then when that moment comes where she's like, I'm out of here, he has that moment of realizing, oh, I can't fix it.
Yeah.
And then he's willing to go. And so
And
I would
then
just,
it's too late.
And I would just say to all you men out there, like even Barry telling that story, humble yourself. Humble yourself under the mighty hand of God and press into your marriage and be willing to get help whenever things are broken, and you're going to see good things come from that.
And I would say just a little tip for the wives. Counseling is not the place for you to take your husband to fix him. And if you're giving off that impression at all to your husband, well, of course he doesn't want to go. He's not a problem to be fixed. And again, it goes back to something we said in an earlier video about staying in your circle. That when you go to counseling, share your stuff, let him share his stuff, but don't bring him in and set him down and then start being like, well, he's doing this and he's doing this.
Yeah. Counselor, could you fix my husband?
Quick way to run off your husband and not want to do it again.
So the moral of the story of this whole video is go to counseling when you need help. Counseling is helpful and beneficial and can really give you the tools that you need to get healthy and work on your relationship. However, don't put all of your confidence in a counselor to fix everything. You have to press into God. You have to press into each other and really work on your relationship.